Hi, this is Danny J. Lewis, and I hope you're all doing good. This video is a deconstruction in Ableton Live that I'm putting together for my friends at Traxsource, and it's featuring one of my Just Underground releases, and this is a track called the Baddest sound, one of the hazard cuts. It comes with very distinctive yellow and black artwork, and the whole aim of the hazard cuts really is to create DJ tools, so tracks that are not necessarily musical. This certainly isn't what I would class as a musical track. Very much for kind of peak time DJs to play in their sets and manipulate perhaps two copies and juggle them together. Personally, I'm very influenced by people like Masters at Work, and I would say in some respects this is a homage to their sound, also a bit of Todd Terry in there as well. You'll see that and you'll hear it as we progress through the video. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this down into different sections. The first thing that I'm going to do is take a look at elements that create the track. Okay, so we're going to focus starting off with the beats. We're going to move on to the other elements, looking at the kind of musical, and I'm going to say that in inverted commas, the musical sections, the sound effects, the vocals, all the other elements that make this track together. And then once that's over, we're going to take a look at the mixing side. Let's take a look. And the first thing I'm going to point out is the duration. So if you look at the very beginning to the very end of the track, this is just over 6 minutes. And, you know, it's not designed to be any particular epic. Like I said, it's designed to be a track that DJs drop in and maybe manipulate with two copies. And most commonly what I'll do when I'm composing is to start with the beats. So we're going to focus on this for the moment. So this is actually a drum rack, and this is a kit that's one of the selection that's available within Ableton Live. And I'm just going to open up over here. Look at the name of this, right? All-Nighter Kit. If you go to packs, this is one of the kits that you can download, and you'll find it. Where are we? Inside, Drum Essentials, Drums Hybrid. So you can go to Ableton Live's website and download this, and it's a kit that has a certain vibe to it. I really liked it. And you know, a lot of the time when I'm making my tracks, I do actually select the individual one-shot samples, but in this case, I was looking to get an idea up and running quickly, and I did like the sound of the kit. Now, they provide previews. That's that's the loop that they provided, and now my beats are nothing like that, but I just wanted to show you for context. Okay, so you can see actually that kit's being used in a very different way. There are some controls over here. I can't remember manipulating those, to be honest. There are some other plugins that are happening here, but we're going to come back to that. That's all part of the mixing side. Okay, let's take a look at the programming. Let's double click. Now you can see what's going on here. I'm going to tell you now that a lot of the time when I'm programming beats, I do it through the Ableton Push 2 controller. Okay, so what you're seeing is the end result of playing with the pads on the controller. And let's just get this running. I'll bring this back into the foreground. So let's listen. It's a very simple beat. Okay, and this is deliberately so because it's going to be the section that the DJ will blend from the previous track. Nothing really changes here. Let's come on to the next section at bar 17. Now there's a very kind of quiet, what I'd class as a ghost kick in there now. So we're starting to get a bit more of a syncopated rhythm, and also the snares are coming in and punctuating certain points of the bar. And that's just towards the end, every 2 bars. That gives it a sense of liveliness, and you can see that the pattern here is not repeated identically. There is a difference. Okay, so one of these hits is removed. If you have too much repetition, sometimes it can be boring, so very subtle removals of drum hits can make a big difference. Okay, so that's what's going on there. Now what we've got here is a new musical element, but actually to help introduce that new musical element, I've taken the whole beats and I've filtered them. Okay, so let me just drop down to, on the automation, the RX 950 filter. And you can see what I've done is I've literally dropped the filter cutoff frequency right down. Now I wasn't really going to show you this plugin, but I'm going to, so you get some context. Okay, so I have used this for the signal path, all right? So it's a bit of a mixing tool, but actually also it has a great low pass filter on it, which is the one here. So have a look at what happened there.
Here comes the champion
sound. So I dropped right down, and then I go up and down over here almost like a DJ manipulating the filter. So that certainly adds some drama. But the other thing that I've just reminded myself about is I actually used a vocal here to introduce that section. Now this is a kind of dub reggae vocal, which I thought really suited what's happening in the track. This is from Loop Masters, and there was a collection of vocals that I bought, and it was in that collection, and I just auditioned samples on top of the track and found something that felt worked. This is going through some effects, and as I said, we'll come back to that. So that vocal is essentially introducing the new musical element.
Here comes the champion sound.
And there we go. So this is a chord stab, and you can see that this is being triggered here as an instrument. A couple of processes here we'll come back to. And you can really hear that filter opening up at certain points. The other thing I want to point out is a crash cymbal. So this didn't actually occur at the very beginning when that filter move occurred.
Champion sound.
Sometimes it's nice to give certain sounds some space. Now, if I'd applied that crash right at the beginning, we wouldn't have heard the decay of the echoes that are occurring on that vocal. Have a look.
Here comes the champion sound.
So those echoes are creating that nice transition. Let me just show you, just you're probably thinking to yourselves, how might that have sounded? Have a listen now.
Here comes the champion sound.
It just felt a little bit too obvious, and I wanted that vocal to have that space, okay?
Here comes the champion sound.
So there is a crash cymbal here that adds a certain amount of drama. It's got those lovely echoes on there on the crash. But you can see it had its own place, all right? So the chord stab is being triggered. Next up, we have a crowd sample coming in. It's a bit of a sneaky one, really, just to put some crowd noise. But it felt like there was an element of a texture that could really sit there. So I looped up a little crowd sample I found. And then here is another kind of cliched sound. This is a siren. And, you know, this is arguably a mixing thing, but I'm also going to say this is just to add a little bit of kind of life to it. I've stuck an auto pan here so that the siren moves around, all right? It's not static in one place. We also had another vocal. Okay, so there's a little vocal sample, and let's just come back to that again. So there we go, just adding a bit of interest to this. We're coming up to another vocal sample over here, and what I'm doing is structurally, to give that vocal some space, I'm cutting the siren out, and then also I'm making a change to the beats here, just totally taking those out. All right, so when you're structuring a song, what you're trying to do is to create interest, to create drama. It's a tough one. Most of you guys, when you're working with your productions, the structure is quite possibly one of the hardest things to do, because you've got your initial idea that you've been working on, you're really vibing on it. Maybe it's about 8 or 16 bars, but to turn that into a track is a challenge. So things like, you know, dropping out beats, dropping out other elements that you've been hearing for a while can make a big difference. It's kind of like less is more. So let's have a listen. That vocal was actually the title of the track. Another way of introducing a new element. There was a vocal there, and literally we are now with some beats and a bass, as well as the chord stab. And this bass instrument is essentially Ableton Live's operator, which is an FM synth. And this is a patch that I created. It's nothing complex. And you can see here it's just using 2 of the oscillators, very slight amounts of the second one. Very simple sub bass. And on a mixing tip, there's a sidechain here, but I'm going to come back to mixing on a separate part after we've got through the compositional side. So using those filter chops to create a sense of a DJ kind of vibe leading up to this section with the siren back. But something new is we have the string, and this is the Korg M1 high string. And that creates a sense of tension. So we're filtering down here, and we're going into a new section. Okay, show you what's going on with this. So what's happening here is there is some pitch modulation. I'm using the automation to transpose the chord stab, and this goes up by 3 semitones. I'm doing the same with the bass as well. Now we've got constant pitch occurring with the string. We've got constant pitch occurring with the vocal. Okay, so there's a new vocal that came in here. And what this section is doing is creating a sense of tension and build. And the beats are being filtered and rising, opening here. So the low pass filter is taking the sound from dull to bright, and then not so dull to bright again. So this creates a real interesting section. And this is designed really in a club to disorientate people a bit, you know, make them feel a bit uneasy. And this will resolve itself afterwards, all right? You'll see that. So it's kind of like the tension, and then the resolution is this release section here coming up. And you hear that the siren kind of tailed off into that section there. Another thing that I added was tom fills, and these are coming from the UVI workstation. This is the Meteor instrument. I've now got a section where there's a disco loop coming in. These are congas. Okay, I'll just solo low so you can hear them. And I manipulated those on the actual audio waveform. Once again, the vocal. And essentially what we're looking at now in the structure is the section where somebody will blend in the next tune, realistically. But, you know, as I said to you, I like the idea of the fact that someone might juggle 2 copies of this, and what they might do with another copy is to come back to that disorientating section and maybe play around with some of these other sections here, so using cue points. So I've kind of left it up to the DJ to reinterpret this. This is kind of like the building blocks, okay? So don't expect anything dramatic here. Really, this is now leading towards the end, so we're gradually reducing elements over time. The ending is a mirror version of the beginning, so you'll see where we started off simple, we end simple, okay? So reducing elements of the drum beats over time. So that's the composition, and you can see here that I've coloured coloured it to just really create a sense of here's some drum or percussion elements, here are some musical elements, here are some sound effects, and then here are some vocals. Okay, so that's that. Just want to bring your attention to the master. So this is the end of the kind of flow. All of those individual tracks all feed into the master. I've only got one plugin here, which is the BX console, and this is a software emulation of the SSL G series desk. And you can see here this is SL 4000, so that was the model, and it's a G series. It had a real characteristic that a lot of people like, and I use this to give my tracks a kind of old school analog vibe. And you'll notice also that this plugin exists on, usually I try to remember to do this on every single track. It may or may not, should exist here. And that is designed to create a sense of an analog mixer. So all of these individual plugins on every track have kind of characteristics of the analog hardware. And so it's routing everything through a virtual mix bus. And I think for me, that gives me the sound that I used to enjoy having on hardware back in the day. Okay, so you see that's on every single channel. But let's come back to the beats here. And I told you that this RX 950 was being used for mixing, and also that it was being used as part of composition with a filter. Now this plugin it used to be a bit of a secret weapon, but it seems people are finding out about this now. And this is a software emulation of the Akai S950 signal path. And a lot of people used to love running sounds through that sampler, and it had a certain characteristic to it. So this emulates the circuitry. And what I've done is a very small amount of input gain, and that's where the character can really come out on this. And it's being used very gently. Okay, so the audio bandwidth up here is essentially the sample rate, and you can see that that's been reduced. And so what it does is it gives it a slightly warmer tone. It's not as bright as it was. And so there's a real texture there that I enjoy. It's a very highly recommended plugin, the RX 950. And as you've already heard, it's got a great filter section on there. This is running into that BX console. Nothing else really going on, but let's take a look at the individual drum sounds and see if I've got any work on this. The kick, I felt needed a bit of kind of beefing up, all right? So this is a Sound Toys plugin called SciQ. I find this is great for warming up the bottom end, and it's just a matter of just adding a few dBs on the bottom end here. Okay, so that's what I did there. That kick really felt like it benefited from it. Over here, cutting some frequencies of that rim shot sound. Some EQ here on this snare, and you'll notice that quite often I do actually use the EQ that's provided by Ableton. Okay, so you can see here a couple of cuts. Don't ask me why I'm doing two, but when you're in the heat of composition, sometimes you do things, and if it sounds good, it is good, you know, that's the whole vibe. So yeah, a few bits and pieces here in terms of the mix. Let's take a look at something else from the mixing side. Now the crash has a real nice kind of echo to it. All right, so let me just solo this so you can hear it. I'm going to take off the echo. That's how it sounded before. The repeater is a D16 plugin, which is part of the Slate Digital Bundle. I am a subscriber of that. And the Slate Digital Bundle has tons of really great effects for mixing. And this is a really good delay. Okay, so it's like an old school delay, and I love the sound of that. Works really well for me. And let's move on to the next one, Tom Feels. Not much going on here other than routing through the SSL. The disco loop, a couple of things here. Really chopping off the low end here with the EQ8. Running it through a phaser to add some movement. Okay, so let's just take a listen to that. I'll take the phaser off. So it's providing some movement. It makes it a little bit more stereo, and a bit more spacey. Let's take a look at the chord step. So what's going on here? There is a sample being played. You've seen that it's being transposed through automation. The other thing that I'm doing here is running it through this Tau DAC. And this, in a way, is a similar idea to the S950 emulation you saw before. What I'm doing here is running it through the EMU2 emulation. So this is designed to make something sound as if it's going through a piece of vintage sampling hardware. And this adds a real kind of grainy kind of texture to this sample. I'll tell you what I'll do, I'll play it. That's with the effect. And that's without. I love the texture that adds. It makes me feel like I'm using some old equipment. And, you know, I'm certainly trying to bring a lot of that kind of personality into my tracks. So that's what's going on there. String, nothing going on there. Just running through the SSLG series again. Now the sub bass. Let's take a look at what we got going on here. The lows, I rolled off everything below 52 Hertz. And some of you might think, okay, well, that's taking off quite a lot of sub bass. But I felt that, you know, with the kick that I had boosted, and then also having this as a low subby bass, it was safer to cut. And so, you know, I experimented, I had a listen, and that for me worked better. I'm also running a sidechain here from the kick. And so that means that every time the kick is hitting, the sub bass is being reduced in volume. So it's just a little safety net. And that felt like it was really grooving nicely. The crowd, just some EQ here to remove some low end rumble from the sample. Siren, so I mentioned before, auto pan, moving the sound around left and right. And then I'm running this through the Tau DAC as well. Okay, so that gives it that kind of old school sampling vibe. Now this vocal that occurs at the kind of disorientation section of the track is going through auto pan as well. It's moving around. I also run it through a glue compressor, which is very similar to the SSL G series bus compressor. And that's just to smooth the levels out, taking away some bottom end. So you can see here low cut and everything below 199 being removed. Tau DAC to add some personality. Repeater effect as an insert again, this time to add some echo on that vocal. And then the BX console over here. So another vocal. You can see it's quite a lot of vocal effects processing going on here. The virtual mix rack. This is a Slate digital mix rack. This is a really great channel strip that you can customize. Lots of different modules here that you can pick from. And this is a Neve style EQ into a 1176 style compressor. And that's really good. You know, really adds some great energy to that vocal, the Baddest sound. I also found it was a little bit kind of difficult to sit in the mix. So I had to do some quite drastic EQing here. I use the CMX to widen the sound. And then also I've got this Eosis de-esser, which is used to just take away some of the sibilance and then to add some extra character, the Tau DAC here. So there's quite a number of processes running on that one. Champion sound, similar mix rack again, repeater for some echoes. The EQ8 just to lift out some frequencies here that I felt was a bit lacking, and then Tau DAC again. Okay, bow, that vocal sample, some low cut, Tau DAC. So you can see kind of like a theme here. You know, I wanted that old school kind of sampled vibe to the track, so I've applied these mix processes to make that happen. And on the master, literally nothing going on here. This is purely to be the bus that all of those channels mix into, and it gives it that analog vibe. And I don't know if you've seen this particular plugin, this is the way it works, but if you click on all, what it does, it makes sure that all of those plugins are now communicating with this as the master stereo output of that mixer. And so we get that true, authentic, old school analog vibe. So the track was rendered with plenty of headroom. And, you know, I was aiming for about -6 dB overall, and that's because it was going off for mastering. Stuart Kettridge did a fantastic job, as you'll hear on Traxsource if you listen to the track, and if you, of course, purchase it. And this one is available at Traxsource from the 17th of April. Big shout out to Brian Tappert, Sheldon, all the guys over at Traxsource. You're doing a fantastic job. And thanks for letting me feature on this Inside the Track for Traxsource.